December 8, 1939, marked the beginning of one of the most remarkable chapters in World War II, the Soviet Red Army's massive invasion of Finland. With nearly 500,000 troops advancing across the Karelian Isthmus and the frozen northern regions, Finland faced an overwhelming force that seemed unstoppable. From the skies above Helsinki, bombs rained down, signaling to the world that a small nation was about to be tested like never before. Yet, despite the overwhelming odds, the story of Finland's resistance is one of ingenuity, courage, and resilience, a tale that continues to inspire people around the globe even decades later. Imagine standing in the frozen forests of northern Europe, where temperatures drop well below freezing and the snow stretches as far as the eye can see. The Finnish defenders, vastly outnumbered and outgunned, relied on their deep knowledge of the land. Every tree, every frozen lake, and every narrow path became part of a carefully crafted defensive strategy. The Soviets brought tanks, artillery, and infantry, expecting a swift victory. But the Finns were ready to turn their homeland into a battlefield where every inch of terrain worked in their favor. The invasion was not just a clash of armies. It was a test of human endurance and creativity. Finnish soldiers moved swiftly on skis, striking suddenly and disappearing into the white wilderness. They set clever traps, including hidden mines and obstacles designed to slow down the Soviet advance. Ordinary civilians were evacuated from front lines, and even everyday objects like haystacks and authoses were transformed into deadly surprises for the invaders. This blend of tactical brilliance and sheer determination made the Winterwar a unique example of how a small nation could challenge a superpower. As news of the invasion spread, the world watched in awe. Neutral nations like Sweden, Norway, and Denmark maintained their stance, while Finland appealed to international organizations for support. The bravery and resilience of the Finnish people captured global attention, showing that courage and strategy could sometimes outweigh sheer numbers and firepower. It was a moment that reminded everyone that the human spirit, when united and focused, can achieve extraordinary feats even in the darkest hours. In the midst of this chaos, Finland's defenders demonstrated not just skill, but a sense of purpose. Every soldier, volunteer, and civilian played a role in shaping history. From the freezing forests of the north to the strategic Karelian Isthmus, their stories are filled with moments of heroism, quick thinking, and unbreakable resolve. It is a story that teaches us the value of courage, creativity, and resilience when facing seemingly impossible challenges. If you are fascinated by stories of history where strategy, bravery, and human ingenuity intersect, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. By following this series, you will uncover more incredible moments from World War II and beyond, exploring the lessons they hold for us today. Join us as we journey into the Winter War, a true testament to the strength and spirit of the Finnish people. As the first blasts of Soviet artillery echoed across the frozen Karelian Isthmus, Finland found itself at a crossroads between hope and despair. Caught in the grip of a conflict that no nation of its size could easily withstand. The country had barely mobilized its defenses when it turned to the international community, placing its faith in the League of Nations to intervene on its behalf. Letters were sent, pleas were made, and appeals for diplomacy and assistance traveled far beyond the snow-covered forests, reaching the capitals of Europe with the weight of a nation's survival behind them. Yet, the response Finland received was not what its leaders had hoped for. Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, though neighbors bound by geographic proximity and shared histories, declared their neutrality, leaving Finland largely isolated in the face of an adversary whose numbers and firepower dwarfed its own. It was a moment of stark clarity. Finland could no longer rely on external forces to shield it from the storm gathering at its borders, and the burden of defense now rested squarely on its own shoulders. This period of isolation was not merely a diplomatic setback. It became a defining force that shaped the Finnish response to the invasion. Without the prospect of immediate military support from neighboring states, Finland's leadership recognized that they had to rely on what they knew best: their homeland, their terrain, and the ingenuity of their people. The forests, lakes, and icy plains that stretched across the country were no longer passive landscapes but active allies in the battle that lay ahead. Every natural obstacle became a potential line of defense, and the Finns began to weave their intimate knowledge of the environment into a strategy designed to frustrate, delay, and, whenever possible, repulse the vastly superior Soviet forces. It was in this environment that the determination and creativity of the Finnish people began to shine, turning the bleak reality of isolation into a catalyst for innovation that would soon capture the world's attention. The psychological weight of neutrality imposed by neighboring countries cannot be overstated. For the soldiers and civilians alike, the knowledge that help would not arrive from across the border intensified the sense of urgency and purpose, compelling them to take ownership of their fate. Military leaders, aware that conventional strategies could not match the Soviet numerical advantage, adapted their plans to emphasize mobility, precision, and the use of environmental advantages. Ski troops were deployed to move rapidly through forests and across frozen lakes, outflanking slower mechanized units and striking with the precision of small, highly coordinated forces. Villages along the front line were evacuated, but rather than leaving the land undefended, civilians assisted in preparing defensive works, placing hidden obstacles, and creating ingenious traps that turned everyday objects into instruments of resistance. The result was a society-wide mobilization that blurred the lines between civilian and military efforts, demonstrating how the absence of outside support could foster unparalleled internal cohesion and resourcefulness. Meanwhile, the diplomatic reality of neutrality had profound implications for international perception. Finland's struggle unfolded in a world still grappling with the consequences of aggressive expansion and political tension, and the absence of support from nearby nations highlighted both the bravery of the Finns and the broader complexities of international alliances. While some observers may have expected intervention from Sweden, Norway, or Denmark, their decision to remain neutral underscored the limits of moral support in the absence of political will or direct national interest. This left Finland's plight in sharp relief, making the country a symbol of resistance against overwhelming odds. A tiny nation standing defiantly against one of the largest armies in the world. News of the Finnish struggle traveled quickly, capturing headlines and imaginations, as the world began to watch not just the movements of tanks and troops, but the resilience of a population determined to protect its homeland without reliance on external powers. The sense of urgency created by isolation also shaped the operational decisions of Finnish commanders in ways that were both innovative and effective. With the knowledge that no large-scale reinforcement would arrive, they focused on the Karelian Isthmus as the central defensive line, meticulously preparing every ridge, every frozen waterway, and every road for potential engagement. Defensive positions were chosen with a keen eye for both natural advantage and the expected movements of the Soviet forces. While small, mobile units were trained to respond quickly to incursions, exploiting the enemy's dependence on predictable routes and mechanized formations. Improvised weapons, like the Molotov cocktail, emerged not as a curiosity but as a practical solution to a pressing tactical problem, illustrating how creativity can compensate for material inferiority in moments of existential threat. Every decision, from strategy to equipment, was informed by the reality that Finland stood alone, and in this solitude, a remarkable story of human ingenuity and resolve began to unfold. By the time the first major engagements began, The absence of neighboring intervention had already left an indelible mark on the course of the conflict. Finnish troops, motivated not only by duty but by the knowledge that they could count on no one else, displayed a combination of courage, discipline, and improvisational skill that would soon earn international recognition. The forests became silent sentinels, the frozen lakes deadly battlegrounds, and the villages carefully prepared obstacles that slowed and disoriented the Soviet advance. Each skirmish, each tactical maneuver, reflected the strategic mindset of a nation forced to rely entirely on itself, demonstrating that isolation, while initially daunting, could be transformed into a strategic asset. Through this lens, Finland's neutrality-imposed isolation was not merely a challenge but the crucible in which extraordinary resilience, innovation, and determination were forged, setting the stage for a defense that would resonate in the annals of history as a testament to what a small, united nation can achieve when left to its own devices. If you are captivated by stories of nations standing strong in the face of overwhelming odds, remember to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth explorations of history, strategy, and human courage. By following this series, you will journey through incredible moments where ingenuity and spirit shaped the course of events, offering lessons that remain relevant even today. As the Soviet Red Army surged across the border into Finland, their plans were guided by lessons drawn from Germany's rapid conquest of Poland just months earlier, a strategy celebrated under the name Blitzkrieg. The Soviet leadership envisioned a campaign defined by speed, overwhelming firepower, and decisive breakthroughs that would crush resistance before it could take root. A vision that seemed straightforward on maps in Moscow, but would soon collide with the harsh realities of Finnish terrain and climate. Tanks, mechanized infantry, and artillery columns were dispatched in grand formations, their commanders expecting that sheer force and coordination would allow them to sweep through the country with minimal delay. Yet from the first hours of the invasion, it became painfully clear that Finland would not conform to any textbook strategy. The dense forests that stretched across the Karelian Isthmus and beyond were more than just scenery. They were natural fortresses, channels, and obstacles all at once, capable of fragmenting entire formations into vulnerable pockets and slowing the movement of mechanized units to a crawl. For soldiers used to operating on well-maintained roads and open fields, the snow-laden woods became a labyrinth where visibility was limited, supply lines could be easily disrupted, and the Finns, nimble and familiar with every tree and ridge, could strike and vanish before retaliation was possible. Even more daunting was the winter itself, an unrelenting force that no map, plan, or protocol could fully account for. Temperatures dropped to levels that froze equipment, sapped strength, and tested endurance, turning what might have been routine maneuvers into near impossible feats of survival. Soldiers found themselves navigating through snowdrifts that could swallow a man, struggling to keep vehicles operational on ice-covered roads, and confronting conditions where even a well-trained army could falter without intimate knowledge of the land. The Soviets' difficulties were compounded not just by the environment, but by organizational weaknesses that had long been ingrained in their military structure. While German Blitzkrieg had benefited from an army of officers empowered to make swift decisions, the Red Army's command hierarchy was hampered by rigid political oversight, with every significant decision requiring approval from commissars whose primary concern was ideological conformity rather than tactical effectiveness. Many officers, cautious and inexperienced, hesitated to take initiative for fear of repercussions, and this rigidity undermined the speed and flexibility that the plan demanded. Even the troops themselves, though numerous, suffered from uneven training. Some were raw conscripts, unaccustomed to winter warfare, poorly informed about the enemy, and carrying equipment designed for conditions far different from the frozen forests of Finland. Maps were outdated or inaccurate. Reconnaissance was incomplete. And the combination of these factors created confusion at every level, slowing advances and leaving units exposed to ambushes and counterattacks. Despite the Soviets' impressive numbers, the imbalance between their expectations and the reality of Finnish resistance became apparent almost immediately. Where they imagined open fields for tanks to roll forward and artillery to fire with clear lines of sight, they encountered narrow paths flanked by dense woodland, frozen rivers that could not bear the weight of heavy vehicles, and terrain that favored defenders who could move swiftly on skis. The Finnish forces, drawing upon generations of experience in these landscapes, exploited every vulnerability, striking at columns with precision, harassing supply lines, and using the terrain to neutralize the Soviets' technological and numerical advantages. Even small units armed with simple weapons could hold choke points and delay the advance of entire divisions, creating a rhythm of attrition that frustrated the Soviet command and shattered their expectation of an easy, decisive campaign. Within this environment, the concept of blitzkrieg itself began to falter. The Soviet vision of rapid, coordinated maneuvers presupposed reliable communication, disciplined execution, and confident leadership at every level. Yet in Finland, these assumptions proved flawed. Radio signals were disrupted by the terrain, orders arrived late or in error, and hesitation among officers compounded the delays caused by snow and ice. Tanks designed to spearhead attacks became bogged down, while infantry advancing behind them struggled to keep pace through drifts and forests. At the same time, Finnish ingenuity produced new challenges. Improvised obstacles, strategically placed mines, and ambushes that turned the landscape itself into a weapon. Every setback highlighted the gap between abstract military theory and the practical demands of winter warfare in a hostile and unfamiliar environment, revealing how overconfidence and rigid doctrine could be exploited by a smaller, more adaptive opponent. Yet, the Soviet campaign did not falter merely because of the weather or terrain. It was also hindered by the very mindset that had encouraged them to adopt blitzkrieg tactics in the first place. Expecting victory to be swift, the army was unprepared for prolonged resistance. Lacking supplies, reserves, and contingency plans for a drawn-out conflict, commanders struggled to adapt, and the troops, aware of their vulnerabilities, suffered declining morale as the expected breakthroughs failed to materialize. Finnish tactics, emphasizing mobility, stealth, and intimate knowledge of the environment, continually frustrated the Soviet forces, turning the massive invasion into a grinding struggle rather than a rapid conquest. In these first weeks, it became evident that no amount of preparation or numerical superiority could fully compensate for the challenges posed by Finland's natural defenses. Harsh winter, and the limitations of a rigid command structure. The lessons were stark and immediate. In warfare, understanding the terrain, empowering leaders to act decisively, and adapting to unexpected conditions can outweigh even the most formidable advantages of numbers and equipment. The Soviet advance, while formidable on paper, collided with the harsh realities of the Finnish landscape, setting the stage for a campaign defined as much by human ingenuity and resilience as by tanks and artillery. The clash between expectation and reality, between theoretical strategy and lived experience, would shape the Winter War and leave an enduring mark on military history, demonstrating that even the mightiest armies can be tested by nature. Preparation, and the unyielding determination of those defending their homeland. As the Soviet advance pressed deeper into Finnish territory, the defenders concentrated their efforts on the Karelian Isthmus, the narrow strip of land that represented both a gateway to the heart of the country and the most viable line of organized defense. Finnish commanders understood that holding this region was crucial, not only for the practical purpose of delaying the Red Army, but also for preserving the morale and survival of a nation facing seemingly insurmountable odds. Every decision, every maneuver, and every defensive measure was crafted with meticulous attention to detail, reflecting an understanding that conventional tactics would be insufficient against an enemy whose strength lay not just in numbers, but in mechanized firepower and the illusion of inevitable victory. The isthmus became a stage upon which ingenuity, strategy, and sheer human will would clash with the raw might of a superpower, creating a narrative of resistance that would resonate far beyond Finland's borders. From the very beginning, civilian safety was a priority, and the evacuation of towns and villages ahead of the front lines demonstrated both foresight and a deep respect for human life. Families packed what little they could carry, leaving behind homes, livestock, and memories, moving towards safer zones as soldiers prepared the landscape for battle. Yet, these evacuations were not merely logistical maneuvers. They were integral to the Finnish defensive strategy. By clearing the inhabited areas, the defenders gained the freedom to transform familiar spaces into intricate zones of resistance without the risk of civilian casualties. Turning roads, bridges, and fields into tools for controlling the enemy's movements. It was a strategic choreography in which every element of the environment, from frozen lakes to wooded ridges, was repurposed to maximize defensive potential, ensuring that the Soviet advance would encounter not just opposition, but deliberate, carefully orchestrated obstacles at every turn. The ingenuity of the Finnish forces became evident in the creation of booby traps and innovative mines, devices that transformed ordinary landscapes into deadly instruments of warfare. Haystacks concealed explosive charges, outhouses and sheds were rigged to disable advancing vehicles, and specialized wooden mines, undetectable by conventional means, were deployed to disrupt the progress of armored units. The clever placement of these traps reflected a profound understanding of both enemy tactics and the capabilities of the terrain, enabling a smaller, less mechanized force to inflict disproportionate damage on a larger, more technologically advanced adversary. Moreover, these measures were not static. They were part of a dynamic defensive system, allowing the Finns to anticipate movements, channel enemy troops into kill zones, and exploit every vulnerability inherent in the Soviet formations. In this way, the Karelian Isthmus became more than a line on a map. It became a living, adaptive battlefield in which the ingenuity of defenders multiplied their effectiveness far beyond what sheer numbers might suggest. Central to the success of these defensive measures was the extraordinary mobility of Finnish troops, who took full advantage of their intimate knowledge of the environment. While the Soviet army relied heavily on roads and mechanized columns, the Finns embraced the snow and ice as allies, using skis to traverse forests, lakes, and fields with speed and precision. This mobility allowed small units to strike rapidly at vulnerable points, then vanish into the landscape before the enemy could mount an effective response. Patrols could flank armored units, harass supply lines, and launch counterattacks in areas where tanks and heavy artillery were virtually powerless. The skis transformed what might have been a constraint, the harsh winter conditions, into a strategic advantage, demonstrating how adaptability and understanding of local conditions could redefine the balance of power on the battlefield. The combination of evacuation, fortification, and mobility also served a psychological purpose, both for the Finnish defenders and for the advancing Soviet forces. For the Finns, these measures reinforced a sense of agency and preparedness, proving that careful planning and clever tactics could mitigate the overwhelming disparity in numbers. For the Soviets, encountering such resilient, unpredictable resistance eroded confidence, slowed momentum, and introduced frustration into an operation initially conceived as swift and decisive. Every ambush, every hidden explosive, and every sudden counterattack underscored the challenge of invading a nation where the people and the land themselves were integrated into the defense, creating a landscape in which victory could not be taken for granted. Even beyond the immediate tactical advantages, the focus on the Karelian Isthmus and the innovative use of terrain reflected a broader philosophy of Finnish defense, one that prioritized flexibility, intelligence, and adaptability over brute force. Commanders encouraged decentralized decision-making, empowering small units to respond creatively to evolving situations, a stark contrast to the rigid hierarchies and political oversight hampering the Soviet advance. Soldiers were trained to exploit opportunities as they arose, to combine local knowledge with tactical acumen, and to leverage every environmental factor to maximum effect. This approach created a force that, despite being outnumbered, operated with cohesion and purpose, transforming apparent weakness into strategic potency. The story of the Finns on the Karelian Isthmus is thus not merely a tale of military tactics, but a testament to human ingenuity under pressure, to the ability of a determined people to adapt, innovate, and turn the environment itself into a weapon. It is a narrative in which ordinary individuals, soldiers, volunteers, and even civilians contributed to a collective effort that amplified the power of their nation far beyond what conventional assessments might suggest. The interplay of evacuation, fortification, mobility, and strategic ingenuity demonstrates that in warfare, as in life, resourcefulness and adaptability often outweigh raw strength, and that even the most daunting challenges can be met with creativity, courage, and determination. For those captivated by extraordinary moments of resilience and strategy in history, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to continue exploring stories where ingenuity, spirit, and unwavering resolve shaped the course of events, revealing lessons that remain as relevant today as they were on the frozen fields of the Karelian Isthmus. As the Soviet Red Army pressed into Finnish territory, the Karelian Isthmus became the central stage of a confrontation that would define the early days of the Winter War. And nowhere was this more evident than at the battlefields of Taipale and Summer. These locations, though modest in size compared to the vast expanses of Europe, transformed into crucibles of strategy, endurance, and extraordinary resolve, where the ingenuity and determination of a smaller defending force clashed with the overwhelming numbers and mechanized power of one of the world's largest armies. At Taipale, situated on the extreme flank of the Karelian Isthmus near Lake Ladoga, the Finnish 10th Division prepared meticulously for the Soviet onslaught, understanding that the terrain offered both opportunities and risks. The peninsula there, marshy and devoid of substantial cover, seemed at first glance to favor the attackers, yet the Finns used this apparent vulnerability as a tactical advantage, deliberately creating a killing ground where every meter could be controlled, defended, and exploited. Finnish artillery, carefully positioned and expertly calibrated, turned the frozen landscape into a deadly network of fire. Each shell, each volley, was aimed not merely at disrupting the enemy's advance but at shaping their movements, channeling columns of Soviet troops into zones where ambushes and traps had been painstakingly prepared. The Red Army, confident in its superior numbers and mechanized units, found itself funneled into these lethal corridors, encountering devastating fire from positions that were nearly invisible amid snow-laden forests and frozen ridges. Soldiers and officers quickly realized that speed and armor alone could not overcome the precision, patience, and intimate knowledge of terrain exhibited by the Finnish defenders. Every advance cost lives. Morale faltered under sustained and unpredictable resistance, and what had been anticipated as a straightforward campaign became a grueling test of endurance, coordination, and adaptation. The Battle of Summer, further along the isthmus, revealed the same pattern on an even more concentrated scale. Here, the Soviet plan to break through the main defensive line met with a defense that combined fortifications, obstacles, and mobile counterattacks that exploited every weakness in the advancing columns. The Finns, often operating in smaller, highly coordinated units, leveraged both direct and indirect fire, combining artillery, improvised explosives, and sharpshooting to create the impression of a force far larger than the one present. Soviet troops, advancing into this network of resistance, were met with heavy casualties that grew with every push, highlighting the consequences of underestimating an opponent who was both familiar with the terrain and motivated by the existential imperative of defending homeland and people. Meanwhile, on the northern fronts, the story was no less compelling, though the circumstances differed from the concentrated engagements of the Isthmus, in regions characterized by sparse settlements, dense forests, and frozen lakes. Small Finnish detachments faced the daunting task of delaying Soviet divisions that far outnumbered them. These units, often numbering only a few hundred, employed mobility, stealth, and an intimate understanding of the environment to disrupt supply lines, ambush columns, and slow the enemy's advance through terrain that neutralized much of the Soviets' mechanized advantage. Ski troops, moving with extraordinary speed and agility, could appear unexpectedly, strike decisively, and disappear before the Red Army could regroup, creating a sense of unpredictability that continually hampered offensive operations. The ingenuity of these operations lay not only in their tactical effectiveness, but in the psychological impact on the invading forces, as the sense of control and inevitability that accompanied numerical superiority began to erode under constant harassment and uncertainty. Across both the Karelian Isthmus and the northern frontiers, the Finns demonstrated a remarkable ability to integrate strategy, improvisation, and environmental awareness into their operations. At Defied and summer, every defensive position, every artillery placement, and every improvised obstacle reflected careful planning and adaptive thinking, while the smaller northern units showcased the potency of mobility and local knowledge in asymmetric warfare. These engagements, though distinct in scale and nature, shared a common thread. They highlighted the capacity of a smaller, determined force to inflict disproportionate effects on a larger opponent, leveraging every advantage offered by terrain, climate, and tactical foresight. The interplay between methodical artillery fire, booby-trapped zones, and rapid, flexible troop movements transformed ordinary soldiers into an extraordinary force capable of rewriting expectations about the dynamics of warfare. The human dimension of these battles was equally striking. Finnish soldiers, motivated by a profound sense of purpose and the responsibility of defending their families and communities, displayed resilience under conditions that would have crushed less determined forces. Harsh winter conditions, constant threat from a superior adversary, and the psychological strain of facing overwhelming numbers did not diminish their resolve. Instead, it sharpened their focus, fostered creativity in problem-solving, and reinforced the cohesion necessary for complex coordinated operations. Each successful ambush, each repelled advance, became both a tactical victory and a reinforcement of morale, sustaining the fighting spirit that would characterize the Finnish defense throughout the Winter War. Even as the Soviet forces adapted and regrouped, they were repeatedly frustrated by the combination of artillery precision, defensive ingenuity, and mobile tactics employed by the Finns. The battles of Defied and summer, alongside northern delaying actions, created a narrative in which the underdog not only resisted but did so with remarkable effectiveness. reshaping assumptions about how wars could be fought in challenging environments. It was a lesson in the power of preparation, adaptability, and the strategic integration of terrain and human initiative, illustrating that numerical superiority and technological advantage do not guarantee success when facing an opponent capable of turning limitations into strengths. For viewers fascinated by moments in history where ingenuity, determination, and resilience defied expectations, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. By following this series, you will continue to uncover stories where strategy, courage, and adaptability shape the course of events, revealing lessons that remain relevant far beyond the frozen fields and forests of Finland. Amidst the relentless advance of the Soviet Red Army into Finnish territory, one of the most striking examples of Finnish ingenuity emerged not from grand strategies or massive fortifications, but from the simplest of tools transformed into instruments of war. The Molotov cocktail, an improvised incendiary device, became emblematic of Finland's resourcefulness in the face of overwhelming numerical and technological superiority. Though rudimentary in design, a bottle filled with flammable liquid and fitted with a rag to ignite upon impact, its tactical impact was profound, allowing small, agile units to challenge armored vehicles and mechanized columns that would otherwise have dominated the battlefield. This invention, born of necessity and the harsh realities of asymmetric warfare, exemplified the broader philosophy guiding Finnish defense: to turn every limitation into an advantage, to make the environment, circumstances, and creativity themselves into weapons capable of shaping the course of conflict. The origin of the Molotov cocktail in Finland was as much a story of human adaptation as it was of tactical innovation. Faced with Soviet tanks advancing along predictable routes, Finnish troops needed a way to neutralize threats that their limited artillery and anti-tank weapons could not fully address. They drew inspiration from prior conflicts, incorporating lessons from the Spanish Civil War while tailoring their approach to the snow-laden forests and frozen roads of their homeland. The result was a weapon that, though simple in construction, could halt or destroy an armored vehicle, disrupt supply lines, and sow confusion among enemy forces. Its very simplicity made it highly adaptable. Molotov cocktails could be produced in large quantities using readily available materials, distributed among small units, and employed in ambushes, urban defense, or forested skirmishes. Each deployment required skill, timing, and courage, reflecting the disciplined improvisation that defined the Finnish approach to warfare throughout the Winter War. Beyond its immediate physical effects, the Molotov cocktail became a symbol of Finnish resistance, a testament to the ingenuity of a population confronting an adversary whose strength seemed insurmountable. The image of a lone soldier, ski troops gliding silently through snow, hurling a flaming bottle to disable a tank or disrupt an advancing column, captured the imagination both within Finland and internationally. It was a vivid illustration of asymmetric warfare in practice. Smaller forces, using creativity, mobility, and intimate knowledge of the environment, could offset, and at times surpass, the advantages conferred by sheer numbers and mechanized power. The Molotov cocktail, in its unassuming form, thus transformed the psychological landscape of battle as much as the physical, instilling uncertainty and caution among Soviet troops while emboldening Finnish defenders with the realization that ingenuity could redefine the balance of power. This innovation did not exist in isolation, but was part of a broader tapestry of adaptive strategies that characterized Finland's resistance. As the Red Army struggled to navigate the Karelian Isthmus and northern forests, Finnish forces combined the use of improvised weapons with carefully planned ambushes, booby-trapped roads, and mobile tactics that exploited the limitations of the invading army. Ski troops could strike with precision, targeting vehicles, supply convoys, or isolated infantry, then disappear into the dense woods or across frozen lakes before the enemy could respond. Artillery fire was coordinated to funnel columns into kill zones, where both natural obstacles and man-made traps amplified their effect. In this ecosystem of resistance, the Molotov cocktail was not merely a weapon but a force multiplier, enhancing the effectiveness of smaller units and demonstrating how creativity and adaptability could compensate for the disparities in manpower and equipment. The psychological dimension of this tactic was equally significant. For the Soviet forces, encountering such a device, simple in design yet devastating in effect, introduced an element of unpredictability that challenged traditional assumptions about armored warfare. Soldiers trained to rely on mechanized superiority found themselves vulnerable to attacks that required neither advanced targeting systems nor overwhelming firepower, but depended on skill, courage, and a keen understanding of the environment. Each successful use of a Molotov cocktail undermined confidence, slowed the advance, and forced changes in strategy, highlighting how asymmetric tactics could shape the tempo and outcome of engagements far beyond what conventional metrics might suggest. For Finnish troops, the device became a symbol of empowerment, tangible demonstration that even in the shadow of a vastly superior enemy, human ingenuity could assert itself decisively, turning the tide in localized engagements and sustaining morale across the front. The Molotov cocktail also reflected the broader principle that innovation often arises under pressure, particularly in contexts where resources are constrained and conventional approaches are insufficient. Finnish forces faced challenges that would have paralyzed less adaptable armies. Harsh winter conditions, limited heavy weaponry, and vast, difficult-to-defend landscape. Yet through observation, experimentation, and rapid adaptation, they transformed necessity into advantage, converting ordinary materials into extraordinary tools that could shape the battlefield. This capacity for rapid problem-solving, combined with deep knowledge of terrain and weather, allowed the Finns to operate with agility and effectiveness far beyond what might be expected from a small nation facing one of the largest armies in the world. Ultimately, the story of the Molotov cocktail in the Winter War illustrates the profound interplay between ingenuity, environment, and asymmetric tactics in warfare. It underscores that victory is not determined solely by numbers or technology, but by the capacity to adapt, to exploit opportunities, and to leverage both human creativity and environmental knowledge in the service of strategy. In the forests, lakes, and frozen roads of Finland, the Molotov cocktail became more than a weapon. It became a symbol of resistance, a testament to the resourcefulness and determination of a people defending their homeland under the most challenging of circumstances. It stands as a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, innovation, courage, and strategy can redefine the battlefield, turning apparent weakness into strength, and leaving an enduring legacy that continues to inspire military thinkers and historians alike. For viewers inspired by stories of resilience, creativity, and tactical brilliance, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth explorations of history, highlighting how human ingenuity can shape the course of events even in the most daunting circumstances. As the Winter War unfolded across the snow-laden forests and frozen lakes of Finland, the resilience and ingenuity of the Finnish people captured the attention of the world. Small towns and strategic positions transformed into theaters of resourcefulness and determination, where civilians and soldiers alike played critical roles in resisting the massive Soviet advance. The Karelian Isthmus, with its dense forests and narrow roads, became a proving ground where careful planning, innovative tactics, and intimate knowledge of the terrain allowed a comparatively tiny nation to slow, frustrate, and at times repel one of the largest armies in the world. Each defensive line, every ambush, and every improvised device from booby-trapped structures to the now famous Molotov cocktails demonstrated how strategy and creativity could amplify the effect of human resolve, showing that sheer numbers do not alone dictate the outcome of conflict. What made Finland's defense particularly remarkable was the integration of multiple elements into a coherent and adaptive strategy. Terrain was leveraged not merely as an obstacle but as a strategic partner. With forests, lakes, and snowfields shaping every tactical decision, Finnish soldiers moved with an agility unknown to their mechanized adversaries, skis allowing them to strike with speed and unpredictability across frozen expanses, while artillery and improvised explosives created choke points and deadly kill zones. Even in the harshest conditions, from piercing cold to limited resources, Finnish units displayed discipline, innovation, and an unbreakable will, using every available advantage to offset the disparity in manpower and firepower. The result was a form of resistance that transcended conventional military calculations, emphasizing that intelligence, adaptability, and morale can rival and even overcome brute force when applied effectively. Internationally, Finland's struggle became emblematic of courage against overwhelming odds. Newspapers, radio broadcasts, and newsreels highlighted the David versus Goliath narrative, portraying a small nation defending its sovereignty with ingenuity, determination, and extraordinary tenacity. Soldiers skiing across snowfields, engineers constructing cunning traps, and civilians evacuating and supporting the front lines all contributed to a story that resonated far beyond Europe. The Winter War illustrated that even in a world dominated by industrialized armies and mechanized warfare, human resourcefulness and intimate environmental knowledge could decisively shape events. It was not merely a tactical lesson but a moral one, demonstrating that determination, solidarity, and creativity could preserve the dignity and agency of a nation facing near impossible odds. Yet, while the world watched Finland's remarkable resistance, darker events unfolded elsewhere, largely unnoticed. In Poland, atrocities continued, perpetrated by occupying forces with ruthless efficiency, targeting civilians, prisoners, and vulnerable populations. The contrast was stark. While Finland's struggle inspired admiration, courage, and hope, other theaters of the ongoing global conflict exposed the depths of human cruelty, often hidden from the public eye by distance, censorship, and the sheer scale of suffering. The Winter War, in this sense, served as a reminder that even amid stories of heroism, the larger context of World War II was defined by a complex interplay of courage, brutality, resilience, and tragedy. Observers were confronted with a paradox. While one small nation could demonstrate the power of strategy and human spirit, elsewhere, the lack of oversight and the machinery of oppression allowed atrocities to proceed largely unchallenged. From a strategic and historical perspective, the Finnish experience offers enduring lessons. It underscores the critical importance of adaptability in warfare, showing that numerical superiority, advanced equipment, and mechanized formations can be mitigated by terrain, innovative tactics, and highly motivated troops who understand their environment intimately. It highlights the role of morale, training, and improvisation, demonstrating that even small units can have outsized impacts when they exploit local knowledge and strike with precision. The Winter War also serves as a moral and educational touchstone, reminding us that human ingenuity and courage can create moments of profound significance, inspiring not only contemporaneous observers but generations of historians, military analysts, and ordinary citizens seeking examples of perseverance against the odds. At its heart, the story of Finland's resistance is a testament to the power of the human spirit. It is a chronicle of individuals and communities who refused to yield to intimidation, who used every tool, tactic, and trick at their disposal to defend their homeland. It reminds us that resilience is cultivated not only through training and preparation but through creativity, unity, and an unwavering commitment to a higher purpose. The frozen forests, icy lakes, and narrow roads of Finland became symbols of strategic mastery and moral courage, showing that the smallest nations, when united by vision and resolve, can defy expectations and command global attention. As we reflect on this extraordinary chapter of history, it is important to recognize both the heroism and the broader context, understanding that the Winter War provides lessons in courage, strategy, and adaptability, while also reminding us of the countless tragedies that occurred simultaneously across the globe. By studying these events, we not only honor the resilience of those who fought and defended their homeland, but also gain insights into the principles of leadership, innovation, and perseverance that remain relevant in all aspects of life today. Thank you for watching and joining us on this journey through one of history's most remarkable acts of resistance. If you found this story compelling, inspiring, or educational, please give this video a like, share it with others who appreciate history, and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth explorations of extraordinary events, human ingenuity, and lessons from the past that continue to resonate today. Your support allows us to continue bringing these stories to life, highlighting moments where courage, strategy, and determination have shaped the course of history.